Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
We are taking a deep dive today into something that feels so strangely familiar yet unsettling.
It really is. We're looking at urban planning, psychology, and the weird allure of the abandoned American and Canadian shopping mall.
It's this fascinating crossroads, isn't it?
Right.
These huge monuments to commerce from the last century that are just stopped. They've run out of steam.
Right. And our listener, the learner, has showed some sources that get into not just why the malls are dying, but the really intense, almost spiritual reaction people are having to their death. So we're really digging into a core paradox here. Let's call it the existential itch. Why are we, secretly drawn to these places that our bodies are supposedly innately not supposed to dwell in?
Yeah, what is that pull? Why do we want to go find the uncanny silence of a food court that closed down 10 years ago? And that tension, that's the real drama of this whole thing. It's a conflict between human memory, our emotions, and this relentless, almost tyrannical economic pressure to just optimize everything, to erase the past.
So these dead malls are like physical battlegrounds where that fight is happening right now.
That's a great way to put it.
So if that's the itch, this weird mix of feeling unsettled but also strangely attracted to these half-dead spaces, then what's the opposing force? Who's the villain in this story?
Well, the villain isn't a person. It's more of an abstract force. It's this idea of optimization, of progress.
Okay.
It's all those economic, behavioral, and social forces. E-commerce is the big one, but also urban intensification that just render these shared physical spaces obsolete.
They just decide they're not useful anymore.
And then they erase them. They erase these physical markers of our communal past, all for the sake of better profit margins and efficiency metrics.
Which means we're not just talking about some sad, empty shopping centers. We're trying to understand the whole sociological and economic machine at play when a massive public space just dies.
Absolutely. And to do that, we need a logical framework. There's a sort of engine room powering this whole analysis.
Okay, what is it?
It's a core binary, a fundamental distinction between a purpose-built space and a space in purgatory.
So when a mall is alive and well, it's purpose-built. It's a machine for capitalism.
Precisely.
Huh.
But the sources suggest that the moment that purpose dies, something else kicks in, a hidden mechanism.
Which is?
When a space loses its economic purpose, our very human need for a genuine, unmediated experience, it rushes in to fill that emotional void. And that's the transformation. The space changes from just a place to buy things into what you can only really describe as an existential portal. It's the human search for authentic feeling, just occupying the vacuum that commerce left behind.
And the best way to understand that emotional void is to step right inside it. Our sources start with this amazing story about a guy named Aryeh. He runs an organization called Liminal Assembly.
Right. And what he does is he organizes these bus tours. He literally takes people through a series of decaying suburban malls around the greater Toronto area.
Places that are just truly stuck in purgatory between, a glorious 1980s past and a future where there'll probably just be a pile of rubble.
And the scene he sets for these tours is it's so immediate. They all gather at this really specific spot, a dingy bus stop on the edge of downtown Toronto.
And it's about 30 people, right? Mostly in their late 20s, 30s. A lot of them have cameras around their necks.
Yeah, and Aryeh starts by asking this question that just cuts through all the city noise. He just asks, how's everybody feeling today?
And then he pushes them. He's like, no, really? What does it feel like to be alive today?
And the answer he gets, it's just whispered from a woman in the back, but it's so brutally honest. She just says, horrible. And that feeling, that need to feel for real today, that's the mission of the tour. They're not there for a simple trip down memory lane.
No, they're looking for something visceral, an emotional experience that, their optimized, scheduled lives just aren't giving them.
He even does this sort of ramshackle guided meditation right there at the bus stop. He tells them to pay attention to the things we usually filter out.
Like the gray sky, the gum on the sidewalk.
The faint smell of cooking oil from a nearby restaurant. He even tells them to listen to a child screaming or pigeons crashing into the crowd. It's all about noticing the discarded, the transitional, the messy parts of life.
And the demographic of these tour goers says so much about this kind of, I guess you'd call it ruin lust. These are people who, as the sources say, came of age in malls.
And that's the nostalgia trigger.
Yeah.
But it's deeper than just remembering old stores. For them, the mall was the first taste of real independence.
Right. Wasn't home. It wasn't school. It was this third space where you could, hang out with your friends, maybe buy a CD from a store that doesn't exist anymore.
Get an Orange Julius at the food court.
Totally. Find the perfect pair of jeans. It's
Yeah.
where you first started figuring out who you were, away from your parents. These places were anchors.
That shared history is why the catalyst location for all this is so perfect. It's a place called Cumberland Terrace.
Oh, it's this bizarre 1970s relic, just wedged between these super sleek, hyper-modern luxury towers in Yorkville.
Which is some of the most expensive real estate in Canada. It's a total anachronism. A ghost.
You just cut through it to get to the subway, and it felt like walking through a different decade. The food court was always shuttered. It still had a wall of payphones.
And the stores were just the weirdest mix of things, like pantyhose, a notary public, fake 16th century Chinese pottery.
It was pure transition. It didn't belong to the past or the present.
And because it was so obviously out of time and everyone knew it was getting demolished, Aryeh decided to throw a party there.
Right, to do business like it's 1984, to try and recreate its peak moment right before it was erased.
And what was amazing was the crowd that showed up. It wasn't just the 30-somethings on a nostalgia trip. It was hipsters, tourists, students, even senior couples, just walking through, maybe remembering what it used to be. The need for that kind of ritual, it seems to cut across generations.
And that ritual is why these tours got a cult following. It's all built around this concept of the liminal space. I think we need to really unpack that term.
We do. So the simple way to put it, the cocktail party definition, is that liminal spaces are places that are between two things.
Not a start, not an end.
But a transition, like an empty hallway or a construction site that's been paused, or, the ultimate example, an abandoned building.
The sources define them as places that represent in-between stages, connecting two different eras or experiences. And the psychological effect is what's so interesting. People feel unsettled in them, haunted even. It's a very specific kind of discomfort.
Right. And anthropologists think that's because our bodies just have this innate knowledge that we're not supposed to dwell there. They're portals, not destinations.
You're supposed to pass through the hallway, not set up camp in it.
Exactly. From a survival standpoint, it makes no sense. So when the purpose of passing through is gone, that feeling of being in a temporary place just becomes deeply unnerving.
And yet, people are drawn to it. We crave that feeling of being unnerved, maybe because it feels more authentic than our safe, predictable spaces.
Oh, the digital proof is overwhelming. There's a huge community on Reddit, Liminal Space. It has over 1 million followers.
1 million people.
1 million people every day posting photos of empty food courts, bridges at dawn, doorways leading to nowhere, and the comments are always things like, dude, that's so liminal.
So it's a shared, recognized feeling. This weird blend of nostalgia, dread, and aesthetic appreciation.
Absolutely. And for anyone curious about this feeling, the semi-abandoned suburban shopping mall is like the perfect cultural artifact.
It was purpose-built for one thing, but it's long since lost that purpose. So now it just sits there in this concrete and faux brick limbo, a nod to the past, and this, amorphous fumble toward a future that might never actually get here.
But the appeal goes so much deeper than just simple nostalgia. That's what Aryeh figured out. He initially thought it was just people wanting a reminder of simpler times, before we were all bombarded with the technological future and all this short-form content.
But it's more than that.
It's way more. He started calling the experience he was chasing a rare emotion.
Okay, let's pause on that, because this feels like the core idea. If it's not just nostalgia, what makes this feeling so rare?
It's not just a general sadness or a fond memory. The sources describe it as a deep, specific, haunted feeling that's tied to seeing former grandeur that is now completely and utterly useless.
So it's like the feeling you might get from a really powerful piece of art or music.
Exactly. It's aesthetic appreciation mixed with a kind of existential gut punch.
And there's a quote in the source material that just nails this. Aryeh says, when you go to these places that have what I like to say is importance built into them, in the detail of the tiles and the polished brass railings, but when you see it empty, there's something very uncanny and eerie about that.
That's the tension right there. You're standing in the wreckage of a space that was designed with expensive materials and grand gestures to make you, the consumer, feel important, feel successful.
I feel like you are part of a thriving society.
But now, it's just empty. The architecture is still screaming this grand narrative, but the decaying reality is screaming meaninglessness.
It's like standing on a stage after the play is over. The lights are still on, but the actors and the audience are all gone. The drama is over. And in that silence, you feel something really unique.
And that's the escape people are craving. It's a feeling that seems to transcend cultures and geographies. It connects back to something really core to being human, the realization that nothing lasts forever.
I think we can take that a step further. The rare emotion is that specific sadness that hits when you realize a stage built for consumerism has accidentally become a stage for existence. You take the commerce out, and you're left with yourself. And suddenly the feeling is profound.
It's a moment of authentic presence that the original design, ironically, was built to prevent. Malls were designed to keep you moving, buying, distracted.
But when the buying stops, the distraction vanishes, and you're left with silence and beautiful decay. And that silence forces you to pay attention.
Let's make this more concrete. The first stop on the actual bus tour is this perfect snapshot of that tension. It's a 1969 strip mall, that is. It's stuck. It's caught mid-redevelopment between two different economic worlds.
It's the perfect visual for a space that isn't really dead or alive. It's something else.
Totally. So the guests walk in, and they're immediately hit with this huge visual contrast. The mall's main floor is described as being as bright and gleaming as an operating room.
And what's for sale in this super clean operating room?
High-end luxury stuff, expensive barbecues, fancy kitchen appliances, velvet headboards.
Ah, so they're already selling to the future. They're catering to the people who will eventually live in the luxury condos they plan to build there.
Exactly. It's a showroom for a future that hasn't arrived.
Yeah.
But the space is mostly empty of people. It's just eerie and sterile. And then you turn a corner and there's this abandoned scaffolding, all white and skeletal. It's the physical line between the projected future and the halted present.
But the real heart of the place is downstairs.
Yes. You take this escalator down to the lower level, the part that commerce has totally abandoned. And the first thing you see is this massive, waterless fountain.
The source describes it as looking reminiscent of a grounded UFO, just huge and silent and useless.
And right next to this magnificent dead thing, there's a sign hanging from chains that just says, prohibited.
Which is so beautifully absurd. Prohibited from doing what? You can't use a fountain that hasn't had water in it for decades. It's a ghost rule for a ghost fountain.
And that whole lower level is just desolate, empty storefronts and cracks on the beige floor tiles that are spreading out like cobwebs. The whole floor just feels sick.
And Aryeh asks the group, how does it feel to be walking around in this space? And there's just this awkward silence.
Until someone finally says, heavy.
Yeah.
And that heaviness is the whole point. Aryeh then tells them to walk in silence. This is where he starts using the sensory experience to force them into the present moment. He cues up this soft, orchestral music on a Walkman.
Something solemn or unfamiliar.
Right. And he plays it just low enough that it feels like it's coming from the walls themselves.
So you have this combination of ethereal music in these intensely desolate, unnatural corridors. The journalist said it felt like they'd accidentally crashed someone's funeral.
And that's so interesting, the deliberate use of sound and silence to create that feeling.
Yeah.
A working mall is all about noise, loud, pop music, chatter, ads to distract you.
To keep you from thinking too hard about what you're doing.
Exactly. But Aryeh strips all that commercial noise away. He replaces it with this soft, reflective music over a deep silence. And the building itself becomes a focus. The goal is to get the guests to be fully present in their bodies and surroundings.
It's a psychological flip. When you're in these spaces with, as the source says, the ghosts of the 1990s lapping at our ankles, the silence demands your attention. You have to be present because the space is just so unnervingly unnatural.
Its original purpose, chaos and commerce, is at war with its current reality, which is decay and reflection.
It's easier to find that authentic presence because the usual sensory overload is gone. The system has failed, and it creates a void, and our minds just rush in to fill that void with meaning.
The search for meaning, it doesn't just stop at the mall's walls. Back on the bus, the conversation starts to broaden. It moves from just architecture to, well, the fabric of our own lives.
This is where Krista, a teacher on the tour, comes in with this really insightful observation.
Yes, this is where the whole deep dive pivots from a critique of buildings to a critique of modern life. Krista says something incredibly powerful and, frankly, kind of disturbing.
This is the mic drop quote. She says, I think we've accidentally re-engineered our lives so that the dominant parts of them are, in fact, liminal.
Wow, let that sink in.
If we connect that to this whole culture of optimization, it explains so much about why we're drawn to these physical ruins. If our own dominant emotional state is constant transition, always rushing to the next milestone, of course we'd gravitate to transitional spaces. They validate our own experience.
She explains it by talking about how we're always looking for the next big thing, the next promotion, the next life stage, the next self-improvement hack.
It's optimization applied to the self. We're always in motion, always in transit.
And the really profound and honestly dark implication is that when we finally get to that milestone we were rushing toward, we don't dwell in it, we don't enjoy it.
We're immediately off, searching for the next goal. We never actually arrive.
Our lives, she's basically saying, have become one big empty mall corridor. We're always rushing, always transitioning, never dwelling, because dwelling feels inefficient.
And so we look at the decaying mall and we see our own perpetually optimized transitionary lives reflected right back at us.
She even ends with this ominous wave of her hand saying, I mean, we're all wanderers, just wandering toward the end.
So the physical death of the mall isn't just an economic footnote. It's a mirror. It's a terrifyingly accurate reflection of a society where constant movement and self-optimization have made permanence and authentic presence this incredibly rare and difficult thing to find.
The irony is just, it's so rich.
Right.
We're seeking out the ruins of failed capitalism to find the anchor of stability that our own optimized, progressive lives have taken from us.
That is a heavy thought, but it brings us right back to the villain of the story. If we're all in this constant search for self-optimization, well, so are our cities.
Yes, and that brings us to the hard economic reality that's driving all of this. The relentless force of progress that wants to erase Krista's empty corridors and build something efficient in their place.
And the data is it's staggering. Between 2017 and 2022, an average of 11,170 malls closed every year in the United States.
1,170 per year. That's nearly double the rate from the decades before. The economic clock isn't just ticking, it's hammering.
And it was a perfect storm, really. The sources point to 3 big factors all hitting at once.
The first and most obvious one is the rise of e-commerce. It just completely negated the mall's reason for being.
Why drive to Sears when you can just click a button?
Exactly. And once those big anchor stores, Sears, JCPenney, Kmart, once they started closing, all the smaller satellite stores that relied on their foot traffic, they just died overnight.
Okay, so that's one. What's 2?
Second is just general economic pressure. Global recessions, strained consumer spending. It just reduced the margin for error. Malls that were already struggling with debt or were in a bad location, they just couldn't survive.
And the third factor is maybe the most important one for the urban landscape itself.
Right. Population growth.
Yeah.
Especially in valuable urban and suburban areas, we need new housing. And that's the factor that turns a mall from just being obsolete retail into a prime target for demolition.
And because of that third factor, the real estate industry came up with a special name for these places.
They did. And it's a pretty derogatory one. We have to talk about lazy land.
Lazy land. Okay, let's decode that.
It's basically real estate jargon for any single-story building surrounded by a huge, excessive sea of parking.
So the classic North American mall.
Precisely. From a developer's perspective, they're seen as incredibly inefficient, underutilized, and ripe for what they call intensification.
The source puts it perfectly. Malls, with their single-story forms, plopped amongst a sea of unused parking spots. In a city with a housing crisis, letting acres of land just sit there as a parking lot for a dying building.
Yeah.
It starts to look like a moral failure of city planning.
It's the ultimate failure of optimization, which is why so many cities, we're talking Toronto, Metro Vancouver, even places like Phoenix, Arizona, are actively rolling out these mall redevelopment strategies.
You're not just letting it happen, they're guiding it, incentivizing it.
And the vision is always the same. It's intensification. They don't just want new stores, they want vertical growth. They imagine clusters of sleek luxury towers with airy retail on the ground floor, integrated with new residential communities.
And little parks with artful shrubbery. The new, planned, sterile utopia.
It's the new operating system replacing the old, messy one. Every single square foot is maximized for profit and for density.
But, and this is a huge but, the sources point out that this process often fails. There's this massive gap between the meticulous urban plan and the messy reality on the ground.
Right. And that's why so many of these places stay liminal for years, even after their death warrant has been signed. The economic villain, progress, often just stalls out.
We see so many examples. Projects get stuck amid municipal red tape because changing the zoning from commercial to high-density residential is a nightmare.
And then others just fall victim to the same economic forces. rising construction costs, labor shortages.
And what you're left with is this even more unsettling kind of limbo. Now you've got giant excavators just sitting poised in the parking lot, half-finished foundations, signs promising a glittering future that feels impossibly far away.
They're truly in purgatory, caught between the forces that killed them and the forces that are supposed to replace them but can't finish the job.
And then you have the malls that just stubbornly resist. They stand there with their faux brick and their plastic ferns, and they refuse to die.
And they only survive by finding these really strange, niche economic functions. They sell one specific thing, Clocks Unlimited or Bikini Warehouse, these tiny microeconomies of hyper-specific need.
The overall message here is that even the most perfect urban plans sometimes go awry, leaving gaps between what we want and what we are given.
The forces of change are just stronger than any municipal blueprint. And it's in those gaps, in the failed progress, the stalled demolition, the stubborn persistence, that's where the human experience, that search for the rare emotion, really thrives.
The gaps are proof that capital can't perfectly optimize everything. And that resistance, even if it's just passive architectural resistance, it creates this unintentional space for real feeling.
Which brings us to the last stop on the tour. What happens when a mall successfully unplugs from that whole economic grid?
This final destination, Aryeh calls it a beautiful and tragic space. And it's because it shows this quiet dignity of persistence.
Yeah, this place is a glimpse of what happens when a structure is repurposed, not by a developer, but out of sheer necessity by the local community.
The main floor has been taken over by this chaotic jumble of cash-only Asian food stalls. It feels like a makeshift street market. It's unpolished, spontaneous, and totally functional for the people who actually use it.
And the other tenants are it's an amazing list. Vendors selling bootleg DVDs, Filipino souvenirs, discount travel packages. The upper levels have carpeted banquet halls and space that's been leased out by a Chinese Baptist church.
And the aesthetics are so strange. The source mentions bubblegum pink walls not found in nature. It's an environment that's visually chaotic, but so deeply human.
And this is why the source material brings up the idea of the global mall system.
Okay, what's that?
It's the phrase used to describe that standardized, corporate, predictable nature of modern malls. The feeling that every mall looks and feels identical, whether you're in Toronto or Tulsa.
And the beauty of this last place is that it feels as though unplugged from the global mall system.
Completely. It's gone back to the earth, in a way. It's evolved based on what its community actually needs. Cheap noodles, a place to worship, travel deals. It's rejected the slick sterility of optimization.
It has this quiet dignity to its stubbornness. You know, some developer is dreaming of turning it into a master-planned community, but for now it just persists as this messy, functional human space.
To really get at that dignity, we have to look at the symbolic power of some of the small details. The journalist actually went back to one of these malls for dinner at the attached Chinese restaurant.
And this story is so evocative. They get there at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. It should be prime time.
It should be packed, but they're the only customers. The scene is just perfectly set. Smoky mirrored walls, plastic flowers, dozens of empty tables, all with pristine white tablecloths.
And then their eyes fix on this one singular absurd detail. There's a reserved sign sitting on top of one of the 30 empty tables.
It's completely unnecessary. It's an absurdity. Who would call to reserve a table in an empty restaurant? Who are they reserving it for?
But that little sign is a trigger. It immediately makes you imagine the restaurant in its heyday.
Right. Teeming with families, people doing business deals, the chaos, the clinking of cutlery, the sound of a vibrant public space.
And that imagined past is just slammed up against the silent, empty present. The journalist talks about feeling the sudden, intense pang of sadness for the party that will never come.
It's the ghost of intention. That's more powerful than the physical decay.
It goes right back to that rare emotion. The stage is still there, the architecture promises a big event, but the event is over. The fact that the table is reserved for a future that will never materialize, that's the absolute essence of liminal sadness.
And there's one final piece to this puzzle, the most powerful symbolic souvenir of the whole tour. It was picked up by Anuj, a young photographer.
What did he get?
He bought a framed Japanese-issued Philippine peso from a kiosk. This was the currency the Japanese government issued during their occupation in World War II.
And it was basically worthless, right?
Yeah, completely. It was called bayong, or bag money, because you needed a whole bag of these bills just to buy anything of value.
And that detail connects currency devaluation directly to spatial devaluation.
Exactly. Anuj's purchase points to this chilling truth, that any number of things, Money, buildings, entire towns, maybe even our own emotional connections can be devalued at will by social and political forces.
So the mall is the architectural version of Bayong money. It was once valuable currency, a center of social and economic life, but now it's been devalued completely. It's just an artifact that only holds symbolic worth.
And that brings us right back to Krista's observation, that we've made our own lives so liminal, so transitional. We see ourselves in these ruins because we, too, feel devalued in a way. The mall was devalued by economic progress. Our sense of authentic presence is being devalued by optimization culture. We feel a kinship with the ruin.
Wow. It suggests the mall isn't just physically liminal, but symbolically liminal. It's a transition between what capital says is valuable and what humanity knows is necessary.
So if we pull all this together for the learner, the real importance of these dead spaces isn't what they were. It's not about being a place to shop.
It's about the opportunity they give us to experience a rare form of authentic presence, but only after the capitalist function has totally failed.
When the system breaks, humanity rushes into the vacuum. We're drawn to the aesthetic of failure because, paradoxically, it forces us to feel for real in a way the optimized, distracting modern world just doesn't allow for.
The source material has this really visceral analogy for that feeling.
It does. It compares it to the sensation you get right as you're about to rappel off a cliff. Your body is just hovering over the drop, your weight is balanced between your foot and a rope, and you're navigating two totally different gravitational pulls. It's unsettling, it's dangerous, and it requires your absolute focus.
But in that danger, in that drop, there's the possibility of absolute presence, of absolute novelty. There are so many futures waiting as you leap into that chasm.
And the dead mall. The dead mall is that chasm. It's the danger of the economic drop, combined with the possibility of filling that void with our own existential meaning.
Let's try to pull this whole argument together with one last master analogy. Let's think about operating systems.
Right.
A mall is like an old, deprecated operating system. It was designed for the 1980s or 90s economy. It runs on slow processors. It needs a huge amount of physical space, the hard drive, and it has this specific, dated, but really powerful aesthetic.
And when we visit a dead mall, we're basically accessing that forgotten aesthetic. It's something the current, sleek, hyper-efficient OSE commerce, urban intensification, it can't generate that feeling anymore.
The new OS is functional, it's fast, it's optimized, but it's sterile.
Yeah.
The old OS, even though it's defunct, holds this vast emotional and communal archive.
And the final journey, back to the city, out of liminal space and back into the functional world, it just confirms the power of that archive.
Yeah.
The tour ends with this rush back to the downtown core. The chaos returns traffic, the anxiety of public transit, a man screaming at the sky at a traffic light, and this jarring realization of, we're back.
The feeling is one of unreality. The journalist says it felt like the mall remnants might have only existed in that specific time and space. Like a fever dream you can only access for a few hours.
And if they turn the bus around, they might not even be able to find those places again because they only truly exist in that state of transition.
Which raises this incredibly important question for all of us as we move forward in a world that is obsessed with efficiency and progress.
If the economic future demands constant optimization, constant improvement, where are we going to anchor our memories of the past?
And this is the final thought for you to mull over. The learner. What happens when the next pivotal news event, a crisis, a shared cultural moment, a tragedy, has no shared physical space left to market? Where will the memories land if every transitional space, every piece of lazy land, is replaced by an optimized, sterile tower?
We might just find ourselves perpetually searching for those ghosts of the 90s, trapped in our own liminal lives, looking for a place where something truly important once stood, even if that importance was just the joy of a perfect pair of jeans and an orange Julius.
A truly unsettling and fascinating perspective.
Thank you for sharing these sources and for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.